Hi everybody, welcome to Out of the Gate, Daily Racing Form's weekend handicapping preview program. I'm Dan Ullman. Thanks so much for watching. Here's what's coming up in this week's edition of Out of the Gate. It's the world's richest race, the Grade 1 Pegasus World Cup, $16.3 million. It's also your DRF Bet Saturday race of the day. DRF handicapper Matt Bernier and I will take a look at the Pegasus World Cup, as well as two 12-furlong turf races from Gulfstream Park on Saturday. The Grade 3 La Prevoyante for fillies and mares, the Grade 3 WL McKnight Handicap for the boys. JK's play of the day, he's going to focus on the late pick 4 at Gulfstream Park. David Aragona's Time Form US Spotlight, a very competitive edition of the graded Fred W. Hooper Stakes at Gulfstream Park. Plus Nicole Russo's pedigree pick, tourney talk, horses to watch, best bets, lots more. So let's break out of the gate. We begin out of the gate with our horse watch segment. Matt Bernier, your horse to watch this week, a very impressive 3-year-old. They tried him early and they found out they were in for a world of trouble.
I see what you did there. That's good. World of Trouble was a horse that ran in the Pasco this past Saturday at Tampa Bay Downs. We're going to take a look at that replay right now. You want to talk about destroying a field, spread eagle in a field. Look at the fractions, 22-2, a shade under 45 flat for the half mile, and he goes off and does this about as easily as you possibly can. He earns a 97 Beyer speed figure. The only concern I have with this horse is ultimately how far does he want to go, and I say it's a concern. I'm going to be completely fine if they choose to keep him at a distance like this. It sounds like the tentative plan for service is probably going to pass in the Sam F. Davis, train him right into the Tampa Bay Derby, try to get 2 turns out of him. I would imagine if that doesn't work, you've always got a race like the Pat Day Mile or the Woody Stevens. He looks like he could be a monster sprinter, and who knows, maybe he can stretch out the Cantaros. I'm always a little bit dubious of.
You gotta try, though. That's where the money is, 2 turns for these 3-year-olds. But you're right, if it doesn't work out, you've got the Woody Stevens. You've got races, of course, like the H. Allen Jerkins at Saratoga, Grade 1 race at 7 furlong. Service, of course, also trains the very talented 3-year-old Firenze Fire. My horse to watch this week, an older horse. His name is Westwood, trained by the red-hot Kieran McLaughlin. This is a horse with a beautiful pedigree. He's by Bernardini out of the really talented race mare Ashado. And as we watch Westwood's victory at Aqueduct last week, this is a horse that you wouldn't think, considering the pedigree, that he'd be a 6.5, 7 furlong horse. He's had his share of physical issues. Again, he's a 4-year-old with only 5 lifetime starts. But as we saw in this race, he is fast from the gate and he is able to sustain at least going 6.5 furlongs. He earned a whopping 104 Beyer speed figure for this performance, his entry-level allowance victory. Kieran is going to take it real slow because he has had some physical problems, has Westwood. He has mentioned non-winners of 2 other races in New York in the near future, and if he gets through that, I think we'll see Westwood take on stakes horses in the near future. It's time for some handicapping. The big one is the DRF Bet Saturday race of the day, the Pegasus. Let's take a look at the field for the world's richest race, the $16.3 million Grade 1 Pegasus World Cup Invitational. It's your Saturday DRF Bets race of the day, and you can access free Formulator past performances for this one on the Race of the Day event page on DRF.com. And for expanded stakes previews of not only the Pegasus World Cup, but many of the major stakes races all weekend long, head on over to video.drf.com or the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel. We discuss each horse in each stakes race in great detail. Matt, there's one horse that everyone's going to be focused on in here. It's the horse of the year. It's Gunrunner. How are you beating him? He's beaten most of these horses already. Is it a situation where it might not be the horse beating him, but circumstance, most notably this tough outside post position?
I really think that's what it boils down to. From a talent standpoint, Gunrunner is very clearly the best horse in the race. I don't think anybody's going to try to argue otherwise. But the fact that he drew post 10, and we know the statistics breaking from post 7 and out, going a mile and an eighth at Gulfstream, they're horrific. It's something crazy, like 4%. I think, unfortunately, that could be the thing that is his undoing, not necessarily that he's not ready to go. If he runs his Breeders' Cup Classic, even though, with that kind of rough outside post, he's probably still just better.
Well, let's talk about the Breeders' Cup Classic. Flores Giroux did not fool around as we take a look at the stretch run of the Classic. He put Gunrunner right on the lead. Gunrunner's facing a challenge from one of the major contenders in the Pegasus. That's Collected on the outside. That's West Coast right behind. You see War Story in the green. You see Gunavera down towards the inside. They can't get to Gunrunner. This was a brilliant performance and a complete race. No lollygagging with his lead changes here. His mind was on business every every step of the way, Matt, and he made those other horses pay. The outside post, you're absolutely right. It's something in the back of Steve Asmussen's mind. It should be in the back of every handicapper's mind. There's going to be a cat and mouse game going in the first turn.
Well, everything that we saw in that classic, as brilliant as he was, there's no denying that, the entire complexity of this thing changes when you've got speed horses, quality speeds, like a Sharp Azteca drawn to your inside. When you've got Collected, the horse that chased you in the classic, drawn to your inside, now you're the one that needs to go on the chase. And I'm not suggesting that he's not capable of chasing. We've seen him sit, we saw him sit in the Woodward, and he was brilliant. But my only sort of caveat to that would be, who's the best horse he's ever sat and passed? He's always been brilliant when he goes out there on the front end and wings it. Who's the best horse he's had to go and run down? He's never run down anyone like this with that outside post. It's just enough for me to say, you know what? I'll take a small shot against.
I don't think we're salivating at the prospect of having a lot of money in against Gunrunner. He is a must-use, obviously, in any kind of multiple race wager. But you're right. I think we could take a very small swing against. And it's Bob Baffert who we're both looking at.
Yeah, you know, whether it's West Coast or Collected, I'm going with Collected. It's just an instance where I feel like his most recent run, I'm going to be kind. I'm going to draw a line through it and say a combination of being hung outside, Mike Smith saying we rode him the wrong way, he needs to be into the running early on, Bob Baffert saying it was nothing more than a stopgap to get here, this was the plan all along, and now also you factor in what I brought up with Gunrunner, where now all of a sudden, Collected is the one that could ideally work out the trip that Gunrunner did in the Classic. If that's the case, and you reverse it with that little bit of adversity that Gunrunner is going to have to overcome from post 10, I'm just going to take a shot. I don't know that he's quite the same horse, because if you believe the San Antonio, he simply can't win. I'm hopeful that the Pacific Classic and the Breeders' Cup Classic Collected is still there, and you should get a decent enough number on him. This is him in the P Classic out there, and I think this was a brilliant effort. Not quite good enough to beat a horse like Gunrunner, but look, if you give him a nice setup, sitting off of a horse like Sharp Azteca, who may have distance limitations, if you tell me that I can get this on Saturday, I'll take my chances.
Wonderful early speed he showed in the Pacific Classic. This horse has an enviable record on fast dirt, and he has a better post position than Gunrunner. It will be very interesting to see how he is ridden going into the first turn. He has a race, a prep race since the Breeders' Cup Classic. My pick in this race, West Coast, does not, but that just means he's following the same pattern that Baffert used last year with Arrogate, a newly turned 4-year-old, fresh off the Breeders' Cup Classic, first start of the year, Pegasus World Cup. Voila! He wins the Pegasus World Cup. West Coast is not as talented as Arrogate, but he's pretty good, and it seems like he's improving with each start. We saw his race in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Let's go back to his prep for the Classic, a win in the Pennsylvania Derby. He changed leads a little bit early on the turn in that race, something I usually don't like to see, but he finishes this race off very nicely. This race came on the heels of an impressive performance in the Grade 1 Travers Stakes. West Coast is, I'm hoping, is going to be upwardly mobile in his first start as a 4-year-old. His Beyer speed figures are going the right way. He has a great post position in the 2 slot. I think he's going to come out of there running. He's going to save valuable ground going into the first turn. And if Gunrunner, Collected, and Sharp Azteca hook up, it could set things up very, very nicely for West Coast. But you got to use a lot of Gunrunner in any kind of multiple race wagers. And speaking of Gunrunner, after this race for him, it's off to being a stallion. And Nicole Russo is looking at his future stud prospects in this week's pedigree pick. And then we've got Peter Thomas Fornatel with Tourney Talk. Lots of exciting tournament action on the horizon. Let's go to those segments.
Hey guys, Nicole Russo coming to you from Lexington, Kentucky for Out of the Gate. Of course, Saturday's Pegasus World Cup, the story of the week, marks the final career start for Gunrunner, a 5-time Grade 1 winner who was expected to be honored as Horse of the Year when that award was presented following our shoot. Gunrunner heads to stud at 3 Chimneys Farm for the 2018 season, and what to make of his future as a stallion. Of course, the appearance of his progeny on the track is several years down the road, but an analysis of his pedigree and his family is a great example, actually, I think, of how you can use a stallion's relatives, this type of analysis to guess at what he might throw. It's something to keep in mind as you look at freshman sires, horses trying new things, or any other situation where you need more data that past performances can provide. And you think, gee, let me look at what this young sire's sire line or female relatives have done to give you some hints. Now, Gunrunner is a son of Candy Ride, who is perennially in the nation's top 10 sires and who is showing promise as a sire of sires. his son Twirling Candy was the second leading freshman sire of 2015, behind only record-setting Uncle Mo, and has continued to produce. He's represented by graded stakes winners Danzig Candy, Finley's Lucky Charm, and Morticia last year alone. So that's something you definitely like to see in evaluating a young stallion, knowing that that sire line is not a one-hit wonder, that it has active production. Additionally, remember that Candy Ride was a standout in his native Argentina. So even though Gunrunner has never started on turf, he might have a bit of hidden turf ability as a sire. That's another interesting thing that you can note with young stallions. Gunrunner also will have a chance to carry on the family line of 2005 Horse of the Year St. Liam, who was a half-sister to Gunrunner's Dam. St. Liam stood only one season at stud before a freak fatal accident in which he broke his leg rearing while being led to his paddock. His only crop of foals included 4 graded stakes winners, led by 2011 Horse of the Year Harvard de Grace. I definitely count it as another high mark to see a good stallion emerging from the immediate female family. That's another thing that I think gives you a hint that a young stallion is going to be productive. Steve Asmussen has also often referenced St. Liam while discussing Gunrunner's career trajectory, noting that the 05 champion was a later developing horse, won his first grade 1 at age 4, had his best season at age 5. Gunrunner, of course, was knocking on the door before winning his first grade 1 late in his 3-year-old year, and of course really broke out last year at age 4. So his foals could very well develop in the mold of that female family. That's another sort of thing to be aware of. They might be later blooming runners. Of course, before we get to Gunrunner's future as a stallion, he has that last hurdle in the Pegasus World Cup, part of a blockbuster card Saturday at Gulfstream. Thanks for tuning in this week on Out of the Gate as we look at all of it with you.
Peter Thomas Fornatale back with you on Out of the Gate to talk about tournaments. There's a whole lot going on in the tournament world over the course of the next few weeks, with important contest action happening from coast to coast, and of course online right here at DRF Tournaments, tournaments.drf.com. The eyes of the racing world and the eyes of the contest world this weekend will be firmly on Gulfstream Park. The Pegasus World Cup will be the final race in the Pegasus World Cup Betting Challenge, revolutionary new contest format, $12,000 buy-in, no entry fee, special rebates available to players. Really curious to see what level of participation the Pegasus contest draws. I'm expecting it will be a game-changing and huge event for contests, hopefully heralding in an era of more player-friendly contest formats. Should be fun to check out. The Pegasus also will be prominently featured on DRF Tournament's Saturday slate. The big event on Saturday, a just-added Grade 1 qualifier for the World Championship of Handicapping. One of the last opportunities to win into that event. Players put up $580. 1 in 10 will win their $5,000 buy-ins to the no-takeout big money World Championship of Handicapping. That's happening next weekend. Folks can go ahead and buy in right now. You're seeing our nifty new landing page on the screen right now. You have an opportunity to buy right in for $5,000. You can also check out the full rules as well as an FAQ on this new landing page, which you can find drf.com/WCH. Make sure to check it out. You'll have another opportunity to win in to the WCH on Sunday. That's the contest we've been feeding into all week. Once again, 1 in 10 will win their entries for the WCH. And then look for more WCH qualifying action next week. It's all going to culminate with a new type of lower buy-in qualifier that we're going to be running for our last chance WCH qualifier. That's going to be happening on Friday, next Friday, that is, February 2nd. And that will be an all-in contest. It will also coincide with a special video broadcast of the DRF Players Podcast, of which I will be a part. That will double as a pregame show of sorts for the WCH. Jonathan Kinchin and I will be talking strategy and looking at some of the races that are going to be part of the WCH. Check it out, tournaments.drf.com. Check out my work on drf.com. You can also find me on the DRF Tournaments homepage, tournaments.drf.com, under the news drop-down for all your tournament news And you can also follow me on Twitter, @LoomsBoldly. That's all for me this week. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatow. Stay tuned for more Out of the Gate.
You asked, we listened. DRF Plus has more flexible subscription options. Use DRF Plus Basic for exclusive news and analysis, including our DRF Live real-time news feed. Or go deeper with DRF Pro and unlock buyers, closer looks, picks, and reports, including the DRF Daily Game Plan. DRF TV viewers get 50% off the plan of your choice. Use code DRFTV50 at checkout. Learn more about the DRF Plus subscription plans at drf.com/plus.
Welcome back to Out of the Gate. The Pegasus, of course, not the only important graded stakes race at Gulfstream Park on Saturday. Let's throw up the field for the La Prévoyante Handicap, a Grade 3 race for fillies and mares going 1.5 miles on the turf. $200,000 is the purse. For expanded stakes previews, visit video.drf.com or the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel. Trainer Michael Maker, Matt, is so dangerous in these kind of races, and he has got a sharp speed horse in Daring Duchess. Wire-to-wire winner last time out. Does she get a similar trip this time?
It's entirely possible. I think the difference is the fillies and mares that were in the Via Borghese, and we're going to take a look at that right now. They're not of the same cut as the morning line favorite in here for Shug McGahee, who we'll talk about momentarily. But you see, when Daring Duchess is allowed to go out there and dictate terms on her own, she's very, very dangerous. The 1.5 miles, I don't think is much of a concern. It's just ultimately, you saw the fillies running behind her there. Is she able to do this with the likes of Apple Betty trying to run her down here?
I agree with you. I don't think much of the Via Borghese. I do think Daring Duchess is okay. I do think she makes the lead. I don't think she makes it as easily as she did in the Via Borghese. You mentioned Apple Betty coming off a little bit of a layoff for Shug McGahee, a master horseman who excels with horses that, as they get older and more mature and get more distance, they thrive.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, the distance thing for me is the most important piece to this. I normally would be a little bit concerned 1.5 miles off of a few-month layoff. As you can see, though, this is her most recent run. This was back in October at Keeneland, and she was visually fantastic, I thought. She sat a pretty good trip, all things considered, and it took a little while, but finally Johnny V, he kind of rolled the dice, was able to shoot up the wood, and it went on, and everything worked out very nicely. I think at her absolute best, she's just simply better than the rest of the fillies and mares in this field.
I agree with you, and I also think that this race that we're watching right now, the Dowager Showcase, that Apple Betty, a horse that likes to free run on the lead, is still effective when she has to pass other horses. And with Daring Duchess in this race, Apple Betty is likely to work out a nice 3-wide tracking trip. Apple Betty, not a lot of value on the morning line, 7-5. I think that's actually probably fair value for her. I would not be surprised if she's even money in this relatively short field of the La Prévoyante. But I think Apple Betty gets through this. I think she's going to run down Daring Duchess in the shadow of the wire. The La Prévoyante's the 1.5 mile turf race for fillies and mares. The W.L. McKnight's for the boys, and it's coming up next. Here's the field for the W.L. McKnight Handicap, going 1.5 miles. $200,000 is the purse. It is a Grade 3. We're expecting a field of 9. Your expanded stakes preview is available on video.drf.com or the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel. I knew who you were going to pick.
That's
before the past performances came out.
That's me.
When the overnight came out for this race. Because whenever Frankie Dettori is mentioned in a race, and I'm so stunned you didn't pick him with Toast of New York and the Pegasus World Cup, you're on Frankie.
Well, I like quality, and I know what I'm going to get out of Frankie, especially in a race like this where I don't think there's a lot of early speed. And one of Frankie's specialties is, among other things, is the flying dismount and whatnot, is getting a horse out on the front end to relax, come to hand, and then when it's time to go, it's time to go. So I'm going to go with Infinite Wisdom in here, and this is not his most recent run, but one of his most recent victories in the John's Call-Up at Saratoga, and this is exactly what happened. Infinite Wisdom is a horse that wants to be forwardly placed. You get him out there. If you back it down, I don't think they're going to get 51 and 3 for a 1/2 mile on Saturday, but if you get something in the vicinity of a 50 half, with Frankie up, I'll take my chances. I don't trust anyone else in a major way in this field. Pace makes the race. I'll take Infinite Wisdom.
He needs to be ridden like this, either controlling a slow pace or sitting just off. He is exiting the 2-mile 8-Challenge Jerkin Stakes, an oddly run race for 16 furlongs in that they were all in on the backstretch about a half-mile out. Infinite Wisdom was actually very game to hold on for a piece in that race. The only concern I have with Infinite Wisdom is directly to his inside, and that's Mr. Cub, a horse who's stretching out in distance and who also has shown early ability. If this pace is fair, it sets things up for my top selection. We're going to take a look at Oscar Nominated's last win. Don't happen very often. It's like a solar eclipse. Here's Oscar Nominated winning at Kentucky Downs. He is a hard-hitting, honest horse for Michael Maker. It was a bit of a surprise. He didn't fire last time out in the Red Smith Handicap. It looked like he had some run entering the turn, but a hole never materialized, and then he looked like a little bit sour. I like what Maker's done. He gave him a little bit of time off.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing. You hit the nail on the head, where when a horse that all he does is show up and run, all of a sudden doesn't run, that's all you need to know and say, okay, let's back off him for a little bit. You freshen him, you get him ready for a spot like this. You know the distance isn't a problem. We also have to touch on Bullard's Alley. Bullard's Alley is the horse to beat in here. He's the morning line favorite. He has Beyer speed figures on his page that just destroy this field.
The boggy turf course.
Absolutely. There was a reason that he ran that 114 up at Woodbine, but you have to acknowledge that if he comes with his A game, he only missed by a nose in the Allen Jerkins at 2 miles most recently. His A game is going to be tough in here.
His A game is going to be tough in here, but as we've discussed many times on our various programs on DRF.com, Bullard's Alley to me is always a really interesting alternative. 5 or 6 to 1, you understand that sometimes he doesn't win, sometimes he doesn't show up, but when he does, he can win. But you get those same questions at 2 to 1, and he's not that much of a value play. I'll take a stand and a stab with the 7. Oscar Nominated. JK, he's going to have the late pick 4 at Gulfstream Park. Of course, the anchor is the Pegasus World Cup. And then we've got our Timeform U.S. Spotlight. David Aragona is going to look at really one of the best betting races of the Gulfstream Saturday card. That's the Fred Hooper. Let's go to those segments right now.
Hey everybody, welcome to JK's Play of the Day. It's Pegasus weekend. $16 million on the line in the Grade 1 Pegasus down here at Gulfstream Park. We're going to do a pick 4 starting in race 9, the Hurricane Birdie. I'm going to single one horse here, and that's Curlin's Approval. Curlin's Approval obviously likes Gulfstream Park. She's won here 7 times, 2 times in the money out of 11 starts. In her last race, she was down on a rail that I don't think is a place she wanted to be. She ran well that day, and it was her first start since the Breeders' Cup. I think she'll improve off of that effort. If you take a look at the highlight here, she finds herself inside of Lewis Bay, down on the inside, and I think she's going to improve drastically off of that performance. You take her speed figure she earned there, give her a couple bonus points for that performance down on the inside, and she should be pretty tough in here. It's one of those races where there's a lot in here. There's still a lot of opportunities, but I still think that she's some value at what should be a short price, but still a little bit of value considering the others that are in here. Going on to the Turf Sprint, I'm going to use 2 horses as A horses. I'm going to use Pay Any Price and Richard's Boy. I think those are 2 premier turf sprinters in this country, and I think those 2 should be tough to beat. However, Conquest Enforcer has always shown a lot of talent. Back with Mark Casse, was running at Pay Any Price late up at Tampa, and I think that horse could be dangerous at what should be a big price. But I think you should have enough coverage with those 2 horses to get the job done. In the South Beach, I don't really have a strong opinion here. I'm going to use quite a bit of horses. I'm going to use the 1, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. I'm going to spread here, hope to be alive. I have some pretty skinny opinions elsewhere. So in this race, I'm going to just try to get through. Now that takes us to the Grade 1 Pegasus, $16 million on the line. I think 3 horses can win this race. My A horses are going to be Gunrunner and Sharp Azteca. If you take a look at Sharp Azteca's last race in the Cigar Mile, he proved that he can go a mile. He proved that he can get that extra distance. He's extremely talented. He should be forwardly placed. Hopefully they don't try to rate him here, use his speed to get all the other horses kind of off the bridle. And if you take a look here, he was actually opening up late. It wasn't like he blasted out for the lead and we're asking the other horses to come and catch him. He was extending on these horses, and that's why I think a mile and an eighth is well within his reach, especially down at Gulfstream Park on a track that favors forwardly placed horses. Gunrunner, his performances in this summer and the Breeders' Cup Classic speak for itself. He is drawn outside, but if you take a look at his last race, extremely fast fractions going 1.25 miles, pulled away from those other horses, and I think he should be extremely tough in here just on a class and speed figure standpoint. And then my B horse that I'm going to use is Gunnevera. If you take a look at the stretch run in the Breeders' Cup Classic, you got Gunrunner here on the front end. Gunnevera's down on the inside. The inside is not where you want it to be Breeders' Cup weekend. We've talked about that before. We've seen a lot of horses that were down on the inside come back and run well since then. I think Gunnevera is one of those types that could improve off of that situation. There's a lot of speed in this race. I think that the speed could fall apart. Gunnevera is the closer that I want. He's been against the track his last 2 starts. It was an inside day at Saratoga for the Travers. It was an outside day at the Breeders' Cup, Del Mar. I think that this actually could be the race where he gets everything his own way. He should be a big price. I think the other ones are more likely, but I definitely think that some money deserves to be put on Gunnevera. Good luck. We'll see you guys next week.
Hi, this is David Aragona with this week's Timeform US Spotlight. Saturday at Gulfstream is Pegasus World Cup Day. There's a ton of interesting stakes races on the undercard, and I'm going to take a look at one of them. It's the 7th race at Gulfstream. It's the Fred W. Hooper Handicap, a grade 3 for older horses going a mile on the main track. Here we'll take a look at the Timeform US preview of the entire field. Things to note here are the running styles of all the horses that get assigned, their early and late pace ratings. And one of the things that really sticks out right away is the fact that 4 horses in this race are assigned the running style of leader. Typically, when that's the case, you're going to see a pretty fast pace. And if click on the pace projector icon in the top right-hand corner, you'll see the pace projector for this race is indeed predicting a fast pace. There are 3 speed horses that are predicted to be out towards the front in the early going. Those are Conquest Big E, the 3 horse, First Growth, the 5, and the 7 horse Moves Like Ali. Of those, First Growth is the one that is the shortest price on the morning line. He's one of the favorites in this race. He's stretching out from sprint distances to this 1 mile distance, and I think he's going to have a tough time of it. Dueling in between horses or however fast the early pace is, it's going to be tough for a horse like him who's shown speed sprinting, has run his best races sprinting, trying to stretch out to the mile distance. So I was a little bit against him, and I want to focus mostly on the closers in this race. Of the closers, the one that is predicted to take the most money, actually the morning line favorite in this race, is the number 1 horse, Tale of Silence. This is a tough race to make the morning line for. I don't envy whoever's job that is. But Tale of Silence looks like one that's going to take a bit of play in this race. And if we look at his past performances, some things that initially stick out are he's obviously a closer. He's coming out of some tough spots. 2 back, he ran in the H. Allen Jerkins up at Saratoga, where he was second to Practical Joke in that grade, or rather 4th behind Practical Joke in that grade 1 event. Takathel, who came back and won the Vosburg, was also in that race. Woody Stevens winner, American Anthem, was in that race. That was a pretty strong field. And if you look at the 129 race rating that was assigned to that race, that is indicative of the fact that it's one of the strongest races that any of these horses are coming out of. This Fred Hooper Handicap is predicted to have a race rating of 123, so this is a pretty, it's an easier spot than what he was facing in the H. Allen Jerkins 2-back. Another thing to notice about Tale of Silence is that in those 2 races he's coming out of, that race and the City of Laurel last time, they both featured pretty fast paces. The fractions of those races and the pace figures that you see in Timeform US PPs are color-coded red, indicating that the paces were fast. And as a closer, that's the kind of setup he wants to get. He's going to get another fast pace here, but it's there are some interesting horses to look at. And I think at better odds, I want to take a look at some others. Another horse to take a look at is Beasley, the number 10 horse. He's a big price at 15 to 1 on the morning line. I'm not sure he's going to go off quite that high because there are some things to like about this horse. Like Tale of Silence, he's coming out of some tougher spots. 2 back when he ran in the Bold Ruler at Belmont. He finished 3rd to some seasoned older horses like Tom's Ready and Stallwalk and Dude. The 127 speed figure that he earned for that effort is actually the highest number that any horse in this field has earned. So he's obviously proven that he's good enough. The questions I have for Beasley are, did he just improve at Belmont? Because the 2 races he ran there were by far the best races that he's run in his career. He kind of took a step backwards when he was stepped up in class in the Cigar Mile last time. This is an easier spot than the Cigar Mile, obviously. But I want to see him duplicate those kind of performances outside of Belmont. Moving on to Game Over, the number 9 horse in this race. Just overall trajectory of this horse's career is something I think you want to pay attention to. He was really rushed into some tough spots after his 2 sprint wins to start off his career. After winning at 6 furlongs and 7 furlongs, he was just immediately stretched out to a mile and 1/8 races in 3 straight starts. It's just a lot to ask of a young horse, a young 3-year-old with only a couple starts under his belt to do that. From there, he went on to the West Virginia Derby, the Pennsylvania Derby, and he actually performed well in all of those races. I think turning back to this 1-turn mile is going to be, right up his alley. The question for him is, unlike some of the others we're talking about, he's not a confirmed closer. He likes to be relatively close to the pace. So he probably has to chase down some others, make the first run at the leaders, and try to hold off the closers. Not the easiest task, but I think he's a pretty talented horse and one that you want to use here. The horse, though, that I want to bet, the one that I'm most interested in at what should be a square price, he's 12-1 on the morning line, is Giuseppe the Great, the 6 horse. He faced some of the toughest 3-year-olds of his generation over the summer and into the fall, running in races like the Travers, the Pennsylvania Derby. He actually ran pretty well in those races. He closed for 3rd in the Pennsylvania Derby behind the 3-year-old champion West Coast. After that, he went to Keeneland to face older horses in the Fayette. That was just a race that didn't set up for him. Maybe he didn't like the sloppy track, but it was just dominated by the 2 horses that went out towards the front, the Player and Neolithic, and he just never really had a chance to close ground. And then last time at Gulfstream, I know the speed figure came back slow, and he had to work pretty hard to win an allowance race as the 1-5 favorite. But you noticed that the pace of that race was extremely slow, blue color-coded pace figures, just very low pace figures. In races at Gulfstream that have such slow paces like that, you often see lower speed figures because it's hard to quicken over that main track. I think Giuseppe the Great is a better horse than that. He showed that through the middle portion of last season, and I think the pace of this race is really going to suit him. So at a square price, I think he's one you want to use. So Giuseppe the Great is my top pick. I'm going to use him with horses like Tale of Silence at a relatively short price, as well as Game Over Beasley, even Tommy Macho, who usually shows up at Gulfstream. But Giuseppe the Great's my pick in the Fred W. Hooper Handicap, race 7 at Gulfstream. Now let's send it back to the studio.
Time for our best bet segment here on Out of the Gate. Matt, you're going to the Great Race Place.
The Nightcap at Santa Anita, race number 10. Let's take a look at the number 3, George from Tahoe. His career debut, most recent, we're going to take a look at that right now. He was a 15-1 shot going down the hill for Jeff Bondy, owned and trained by Jeff Bondy. Couple things you got to keep in mind about this race. Guess what? Spoiler alert, he's not going to run down the 8-5 front runner. That's fine. Jeff Bondy doesn't win races first out. That's not his MO. That's not how he operates. This horse, second off the bench now, second lifetime start. He's going to stretch out in distance to a mile. He catches a couple of decent horses. I don't think he's an absolute slam dunk, but he is the morning line favorite at 7-2. I think this race could go a number of different ways. I think your favorite is going to be in that 7-2, 4-1 range. That's why I don't really care if he is the favorite. I think you're going to get a decent enough number. 3.5-1, I'd play him to win. George from Tahoe on the stretch out for Bondy. I'll go with him.
Back to the East Coast for me. Parks, race number 2. I'll take the number 6, High Rapid Lady, and this is a mare who's in very good form right now. We're going to go back to her most recent start, a $5,000 condition claimer. She sat parked on the outside. She takes the lead. Take a look at how she's moving in the final 16th of a mile compared to the horse that was on the lead that she corralled. That horse is just crying for somebody to carry her home, and High Rapid Lady is finishing with a bit of gusto. Now she's going to step up into a higher class level here, but she's projecting for a similar trip, either on the lead, where Timeform US has her on their pace projector, or sitting just off of the pace. Either trip works for me. Now she's 2-1 on the morning line. I really wouldn't want to take much less, but I think you could also make the argument that fair value on High Rapid Lady is 8-5. That's race number 2, the number 6, High Rapid Lady at Parks. We thank you so much for watching Out of the Gate this week, and we want to remind you to follow all of DRF TV's offerings on Twitter at DRF Video, and for all of the latest from America's Turf Authority Daily Racing Form, follow on Twitter at DRF Inside Post. That's it for this week. Best of luck when your horses break out of the gate.